My college draft is proud to announce my conference called Educate You. Educate You core areas will cover recruitment, retention, and how to build a strong alumni base of underrepresented and first-generation college students.
Hey, welcome to another edition of the Educate You podcast, being brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. I'm your host and facilitator, Lamont. I got my guy always, Dr. Ricky Frierson, our in-house scholar, and in his absence, David Hartman. Man, we miss you, brother. But today we're so excited to have Dr. Jayne Morgan. Good morning, Dr. Morgan.
Good morning, Lamont. How are you guys?
Good. It's indeed a pleasure. So, Dr. Morgan, if you don't mind, it may be maybe two people on this earth that don't know who you are. So, can you, if you don't mind, telling people a little bit about yourself, please?
Of course. So, I am the executive director of the COVID task force for Piedmont Healthcare, and Piedmont Healthcare is the largest healthcare system in the state of Georgia. In fact, just today, we announced our expansion into the University of Augusta with 4 more hospital campuses coming in under our umbrella. So we have, I've lost count, maybe close to 20 hospitals, I can't remember. So across the state of Georgia. Prior to that, before COVID hit, I actually led our innovation program and our research across the system. So all of the research and innovation regarding developing intellectual property, securing our patents, bringing in licensing opportunities, running our accelerators so we can develop our own medical devices. And then COVID hit, and I was asked to transition to lead this task force. You know, it was supposed to be short term. I don't know if everybody remembers, but we were going to shelter in place, 60 or 90 days, let it pass, and then be back on about our lives and in the summer. And of course, you know, as a society, we couldn't do that. And so I've had longevity in this role. And so here I am, 14 months into a role that was supposed to be 3 or 4 months. Dr. Morgan, we just need you to, we need somebody to manage this crisis and then we'll be back. So here I am. I'm a cardiologist by training. I'm actually a formally trained cardiologist. Not only do I have a lot of experience in seeing patients, but I also came in through industry, through Solvay and Abbott in their R&D, research and development, medical affairs, and business development roles, developing drugs and developing devices in the pharma and device industry. I spent several years there actually before coming to Piedmont. So when the vaccines began to develop, I understand that process very, very well. As I used to lead that process, I know what it's like from stem to stern. I know what they're doing. I understand the language. And so I've been able to use my voice in this pandemic to try to bring some education and information in layman's terms. Everybody's not a scientist, for people to kind of understand what's happening.
Again, you listen to the Educate You podcast being brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. Before we jump in, Dr. Morgan, when did you realize, because I read your bio, when did you realize you was a superhero? Like, what
I guess just now. Man. I don't know. I've never heard that before.
You do amazing.
I was thinking, what I was thinking was, we don't need a Dr. Falchi today. We got Dr. Morgan on. We got all the expertise we need for
I know,
people.
It's amazing.
Make it plain. And you know, Dr. Morgan, I first and foremost, in all seriousness, I want to say thank you for what you're doing on the front lines for society, for Americans, for minorities in particular, and getting this on. And then number 2, and just because I have to make this this slow dog whistle. Don't worry, it'll disappear. Don't worry about it. It'll disappear. You just keep going. In another couple of weeks, it'll just magically. When it gets back to summertime.
Like magic stardust. It's going to disappear. All the scientists watch that and go, what is he talking about? Right, exactly.
Yeah, I think anybody with any kind of advanced intelligence says, okay, magic show. We just.
Right, exactly.
But anyway.
No, absolutely. And interesting, you mentioned Falchi. So my very first research job, I was a resident at George Washington University. And I was moonlighting. That's what doctors do when they're trying to make extra money. We call it moonlighting at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases over at the NIH, under Dr. Falchi. Of course, I didn't know him. I came in at night, right? Nobody's there. All the important people have gone home. That's why they're hiring me to manage all of the infectious diseases research patients overnight. But I did that for about 1 or 2 years to make extra money to get through my residency. And so now that, Falchi is so prominent, of course, he was always prominent. I wonder, was he reading my notes the next morning? Because I would have to write up all the patients. Was Falchi the one coming in, reading my notes to see, what did that moonlighter do overnight with my patient? So I've always wondered if somehow I'll be able to connect the dots, because certainly he was there. We didn't physically, interact, but I was a part of that very silent night team that came in and kept everybody alive overnight. And then you disappear in the morning. So, those one of those behind the scenes kind of things. Yeah.
Well, I had a question for you. I'm gonna jump right into it because I'm excited that you're here, because hopefully you can help me too in full transparency with my mental blocks on this subject that we're gonna talk about today. First and foremost, I'm fully vaccinated. But second thing,
thank you. Thank you. Congratulations.
Yeah. I want to make sure I let that be known. Okay. But it was a challenge because I know in your bio you talk about trying to expand from getting urban participants to rural participants as well, making sure there's equity in the representation of geographic location. And then the other part of your research is to really make sure that we have it was quoted, I think, in your bio as effective minority recruitment of trials. And so the first question I have is, why is it difficult? I think there's historical things and stuff, but in your opinion, why is it difficult for underrepresented individuals and communities, specifically in this context, I'm thinking about Latino and African American and indigenous populations, to want to volunteer for situations like this with the COVID vaccine, number one. And then number two, a little bit of the limited science that I know, does epigenetics play in this, where the traumas of past trials, the histories of past trials, and the impact on things we've heard with, the Tuskegee trials and trauma of slave trade and all these, how much does that really impact people's psyche and saying, I don't want to mess with medical procedures in the United States because of the way we've been treated in the past?
Yeah, so absolutely. When you're talking about populations of color, and we're talking about these COVID vaccines, right? The COVID vaccines represent 3 points of the triangle that all came together to bring us these vaccines, where Black people don't necessarily have great relationships. So number one, it definitely brought in the healthcare system. We really have a tepid relationship with large medical systems and the healthcare system. We're not always treated well, or equitably, or comfortably or respectfully. So we don't have a great relationship. So that's one tip of the triangle. Then the next tip is research. If we have a tepid relationship with the medical system, research is almost zero, non-existent. Not just Tuskegee experiment, but Dr. James Marion Sims, who experimented on all of these Black women to develop surgical procedures for white women to restore quality of life. And all of these experiments that he did on Black women, he did without anesthesia. When I say experiments, I mean surgeries. One woman underwent 30 or 40 surgeries with no advocacy, nobody to speak up for them. They need clothing, they need food, they need a place to sleep. They screamed and writhed on the table, So we understand all these atrocities. So the second part of that triangle really is research. We really don't mess around too much with research. And then the third tip of the triangle is what? The U.S. government. Operation Warp Speed, a previous administration that was hostile to people of color. So all three of these come together to bring us this vaccine. So there really should have been no surprise that there was what we call vaccine hesitancy. Really, it was almost vaccine neverancy. And then we add in this new scientific platform called messenger RNA. What's that? So, a big soup of what do you expect? And we certainly didn't have any education that rolled out ahead of these vaccines. There was no communication. There was no outreach to communities. So absolutely, not only epigenetics and historical context, but also sort of just the lack of information and education. As I talk with people, when people had information, they actually are able to make decisions. And even though the Tuskegee experiment, ended in 1972, the fact of the matter with regard to research and clinical trials is we haven't provided any opposing information to that since 1972. So if we don't have anything else to think about, if things haven't changed, if we don't have a new way to think about it, then that's the last that we heard. And so the answer is no.
Are you tired of all the emails and phone calls from colleges that you never even heard of? Sign up to WheresMyDocs.com and only work with the colleges that you choose. WheresMyDocs.com, where college recruitment is made simple.
Do you think, one thing too that when I think about these atrocities that you're mentioning, we have delayed recognition and apologies to the community as well, right? It'll be like, it's like you said with the government sometimes, or with medical files is secret, is kept under wraps for 10, 15 years, or sealed and for a certain amount of time, and then, oh yeah, this happened. It was bad. We acknowledge it. And then there's no apology for it. The long-standing hurt, the long-standing pain, the hesitancy of that. So what strategies do you,
right. The betrayal.
Yeah.
And, the allegiance that we have to America, and that America continues to really not live up to its ideals at our sacrifice. But we continue to believe in America and continue to believe in the ideals of America and push forward. So yeah, it's always, a betrayal. And then we have to reset and still try to move forward as Americans. And what does that mean? And what does that mean for us? And when do we really have full citizenship, not legal citizenship, but societal and social and professional citizenship here? And that's what, and that's what we're talking about. Sure.
So I think what's really dynamic about this call today is, first of all, I want people to see that it's a woman of color who is leading this effort at Piedmont, right? And I always use
video.
Yeah, and I want to inspire. So this is inspirational for me because I have 2 daughters and things like that, and so I want people to realize that our communities have always lacked. Not always lacked. Have always had intelligence and been able to. And so you heard, if you read,
we haven't had this opportunity.
Exactly, and that's what I want to see in vision of people saying, oh, because, I think about Hidden Figures, and how many women and people of color could have been really dynamic in mathematics if we had that history told earlier.
Or if we had educational opportunities.
Yeah.
And, obviously it's generational, because if your parents didn't have educational opportunities, then they're not able to live in neighborhoods, they're not able to get jobs that are higher earning. They're not able then to live in neighborhoods with better schools. Then they have children who are in neighborhoods with other families who didn't get an education, and they're going to schools where they may not be, so it's just this perpetual cycle of poverty and disenfranchisement, and it requires so much to break out of it. Education is one of our paths to doing that. Yeah. So even with education, unfortunately, what we have shown very clearly when we look at health equity is the fact of the matter is, the more education a Black person has, the greater the wealth gap. So that's even though we're able to earn a higher living and have a higher standard of living, provide more for our families, compared to our white colleagues with similar or less education, the gap is even larger. So the higher you go up the education train, the education ladder, the wealth gap actually widens.
Don't tell me this now. I got a PhD, and I'm wondering why I'm trying to make them stretch. Now, come on,
right. Why are you trying to make ends meet? And that's right. So if you want to understand the infrastructure of racism, you look at the top, the elite of Black people in this country and compare them to their colleagues, the wealth gap is the greatest amongst the top, not at the bottom.
I see I should have had this meeting yesterday because I just had my director's meeting. I would have went in there and been like, give me an analysis.
Right. Go in with some data and say, here's what it is. You know, we can't correct that overnight. We have to all continue to keep knocking on the doors, but I think we all see representations of that. You know, we all strive for excellence. As you said, there's always excellence. There's always been excellence in our community. You know, what it takes for you to get a PhD and what it takes for me to get an MD, you know, far greater than our white fellow Americans to get this, where they may have started out with so much, you know, support and societal uplift, and just the hurdles that we have to overcome, not only to get there, but then to stay there, to survive there, to get out of there, to get what we need, those degrees. And so, you know, when you see people with a lot of higher degrees, certainly people of color, those people have gone up against straight brick walls and have had to survive, and oftentimes have had to survive alone, have learned to, whereas your colleagues are thriving, you really are just trying to survive in a system that really wasn't meant for you and is not going to be welcoming to you. So, and then we see that when we get out into our careers, into our jobs, that the wealth gap is huge with regard to your level of education. When you look at people that you compare yourselves apples to apples. When you compare apples to apples, it becomes incredibly, incredibly clear. So that I didn't even need to look at the data to know that. I already knew that. And then I saw the data, I was like, boom, boom. That this
validates what I know. So can I ask you a question? Going back to kind of like with all this knowledge that you have and understanding in the medical field and understanding these 3 points that you mentioned, as far as the hesitancies of, you know, what is your approach strategically in helping minorities be comfortable with this, you know, COVID vaccine or vaccinations in the medical field, be comfortable with knowing how to embrace or get more of a genuine relationship in the medical, you know, caretaking of individuals, and is your strategic approach fundamentally different than traditional approaches when it comes to vaccine distribution in generations of communities?
So I think so, and I think that's why I developed the Stairwell Chronicles. I just felt that there needed to be a voice that was speaking to people that I understand, that I know, you know, and to speak in a way that was conversational, and to do it in short clips such that people don't get lost in the details or lose your train of thought. And so I do just these little 60-second, you know, vignettes. It's not just for people of color. It's for everybody who is seeking real scientific answers, not down these social media rabbit holes and, you know, whatever's going on down there. Like, it's people who really are seeking some answers to questions. And then I try to answer those questions. And so that was a new, unique, creative method of let me just sit on my steps and talk to you like a neighbor. And I'm going to tell you, you know, what this is. And I'm going to explain it in 60 seconds or less. So if you don't like what I'm saying, you've only invested 60 seconds of your time. You won't be that mad at me, right? You didn't invest that much time. It was 60 seconds. You can blow me off. So that's what I've created to kind of do that. And I've done some in Spanish as well, you know, reaching out to that community as well. But I think it's important because all of our minds, right, are very active, very intelligent, always seeking information. And if we don't provide information to our brains when they are seeking answers to questions, that space gets replaced by imagination. And then when imagination sets in, you start to hold on to pieces of information that feed whatever the narrative that your imagination has come up with. And then the next thing you know, off you are in some, you know, weird, you know, cultish thought.
Alternative facts.
Right. For me, that I always find hard to believe when people ask me a question, I go, how did you get there? Like, why would you think that? But then I have to remember, people didn't have information and their brains are on. So imagination took over. This is what they thought. And then they read something that supported, you know, that little piece of information that was incorrect. And the next thing you know, it's like this huge problem. And so I always want to replace imagination with information. And most of the time when I have an opportunity to talk with people, it's sort of like, aha, oh, I didn't know that. This is what we needed to hear. Or these are the pieces. That's because people are thinking. And so if you don't give them the information, they're not going to stop thinking. They're just going to think about some other things, right?
Dr. Morgan, unfortunately, we gotta come to a close, but because I'm learning so much. We gotta do this again first and foremost. Can I get on your schedule as soon as possible?
You can. Let me know so I can have my equipment in the right room.
No problem.
Know what I'm doing.
So within 30 seconds, if it's anything, because man, you got so much wisdom. Is there anything that you think that the people should know in within 30 seconds that we don't know?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we should know is when I look at the FDA briefing documents for Moderna and Pfizer, that's the actual data that went to the FDA for this emergency use authorization approval, 30,000 people in the Moderna trial, 40,000 people in the Pfizer trial. 94.5% efficacy, meaning how well the vaccines work for Moderna, 95% efficacy for Pfizer, how well those vaccines work. When I look at the subpopulation of Black people in those trials, 10.3% Black in the Moderna trial, 9.8% Black in the Pfizer trial. That is incredible because by and large, we do not participate in clinical trials. In fact, I've never seen that degree of participation in any clinical trial that was not specific to a Black population. And so these companies were intentional, they were purposeful, and they worked to include, and even though they did not reach the 13.4% that we represent in the mosaic of America, they actually did a phenomenal job. And when you look at the volume, 70,000 people, that means 10% were Black. So that's 7,000 people. That is a lot of people. And when I then look at the data specifically of that subpopulation of Black people in those FDA documents, when I sat down and read those documents, of the Black population in both Moderna and Pfizer, if we look at how many people developed symptomatic COVID 2 weeks following that second shot, I was surprised to see that that number was 0. And so what I'm saying to you is that even though the efficacy of those trials was 94.5% and 95%, the efficacy in the Black population was 100%. So we should recognize that and understand that this data has relevance to our population and that we were represented and that our efficacy actually exceeded the overall efficacy of the vaccine, our subpopulation. And I would
quick question on that. Do you support and encourage Black parents to get their kids vaccinated when available?
I do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I just want to make sure we get that out there because I know people want to know about that, about the babies, you know.
I do. I think we should all be vaccinated, protect ourselves, protect your children. Don't forget, we were on the forefront of this COVID, communities being decimated. And we have lost as a population 3 life years from our mortality in just the 1 year of COVID. We now have a life expectancy that has decreased by almost 3 years.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Morgan. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So again, you've been listening to the Educate You podcast brought to you by My College Draft, where education is the new money. Our special guest, Dr. Morgan. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right. You're welcome. See you guys later.